guests have arrived, Ambassador.
We should go, my dear.
Really 007.
Welcome, everybody, to the Really 007 podcast. I'm Tom Pickup, and we're speaking to the most iconic twins in the James Bond franchise. That's David and Tony Meyer. So good afternoon, gents.
Hi. Hello.
Great to see you. Well, alongside me today, I've got two of my brothers. I've got Harry and Math.
Hello.
Hello.
And we've got John here.
Hello.
It's a very fraternal gathering.
Yeah, this happens occasionally, yes.
As
Well,
I came into David's flat, I passed a family with triplets,
oh,
three kids, all in one thing. And here you are. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
yeah.
Right.
It's a family show today. Yeah. So in terms of our channel, you can catch all our other interviews on our YouTube channel, as well as listen to them online on iTunes and Spotify and other places. And please subscribe, share, and comment on all those. Yeah, get involved. We're also on social media, so Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you look up Really 007 Pod, there's so much interaction between Bond fans from all over the world. And I'm telling you, both of you guys, Octopussy is getting an awful lot of love. And it's great to see because it is genuinely one of our absolute top favourite Bond films. And
It's lovely to hear.
know that, yeah.
It didn't get rave reviews when it first came out, to be
Yeah.
honest.
It's going up the list now. I'm tempted to just say why, actually. I'm delighted. It's a
Well,
favourite.
I think possibly because it's got. I know it was going up against Never Say Never Again, and wasn't it? So they were trying to make it
Yes, we beat
as
that. Yes.
Bond as it could be. So it's got all the ingredients. The stunts in it are certainly amongst the best.
Yeah.
And we've spoken to John Glenn about how they were filmed, so that's given us a real insight of that. I think the characters, there's so many brilliant villains in it. The location of India and then Berlin, and Roger Moore it's possibly his best performance for us. So there's a million reasons to love Octopussy for us, really.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm doing the interviewing now.
Well, yeah, for me, I think why I love Octopussy so much is there's no Bond film that has the perfect blend of serious tension and comedic timing at the same time. There's such a great contrast between how can a film that has James Bond swinging like Tarzan to actually stopping a nuclear war. Yeah, I think that's amazing that they're in the same film. I love it.
You're very kind about our opening sequence, which
Yeah,
I think it's sort of inspired by David Lean's
Great
opening of
Expectations.
Great Expectations.
Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat.
You're running through a strange place and suddenly meeting somebody like that is got straight out of Great Expectations. It
Well,
does seem to
that's
be
a good place to start, I must admit. But
Yeah.
we've crept up the list of Bond films, and it seems to me there's a sort of an affection for it now because it's before CGI, and it's a wonderful hands-on feel, and it's a bit messy and it's a bit silly. But on the other hand, we've got so much sort of high definition CGI big stuff coming in the 90s that it's rather nice to see something like Octopussy, I think.
Those guys really are hanging on the side of a plane and on top of the train, and we'll get to that later. The train.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether Glenn talked about it, but when the car goes into the river, that's pretty close to that boat.
Yeah, it is. It's unbelievable. It just
that's dangerous. That they get out of that boat pretty quick, because I mean, you might say they were lucky.
Yeah, I don't think they'd film it like that today. So, guys, in terms of your upbringing, how did you get into the world of acting?
Via school, I mean, straight away, actually. We both did quite a lot of drama on school, and Shakespeare, and our public school. We have the famous thing of getting a public school drama school, but we did have some good English teachers who did King Lear and the Scottish play, and alternating with Gilbert and Sullivan. So, I won't go into details, but that's
Alan Ayckbourn went to the same school.
Oh, right.
The Durden Smiths were there, and there's a guy who's around a lot recently, whose name escapes me, and Shane Bryant, who alas is no longer with us, but famous for Hammer Horror, but deserves better, actually. We were there. We all played the three sisters in King Lear to Bob Scott, Mr. Manchester. Extraordinary production. But I would go back further. We were acting in the nursery. We had a curtain. We had a sheet over a curtain, and probably directed by our older sister, who was very bossy. And we used to do pantomimes and everything. We had a dressing up box. You see, I mean, this was in the days before mobiles, and we made our own entertainment. We didn't have a television until we moved into the big house, which was probably only when we were 6 or whatever. We didn't grow up, looking at a television, and we played a lot in the nursery.
Yes, we all did in those days. Just a stick and an apple and a walk in the country. That's all you had in those days. But then you went to Cambridge. I went to drama school. I'd been to university, but the only thing I was any good at was acting and directing. So I went to drama school. And you went to Cambridge, and then found at Cambridge that acting was the main thing. And you were a Cambridge actor. And went from Cambridge to like Ian McKellen and Derek Chappie, went into the Glasgow.
I went straight to the Citizen Theatre Glasgow with a director who I worked with at Cambridge, and yes, we had a great time. And I designed sets at Cambridge too. Alas, the wonderful man who taught me architecture for 3 years, the first thing he said was, "Well, I hope you have a good time at university studying, but I hope you're not going to do too much at the ADC." And I had to admit that
it took over completely.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to come to Cambridge. But anyway, we did some interesting work.
Gosh, yeah. Well, you did get into.
And I contacted the 3 people who directed me at Cambridge. They're the 3 of my oldest and best friends.
Well, I know one of the guys you've acted with is Ian McKellen, isn't it? And he actually went to our school. I mean, years before, obviously. In Bolton, yeah. So he's a great.
We haven't acted. I don't think we've acted with Ian. at all. We do know him.
Surely
You know him, right? Okay.
I maintain I saw his Richard II.
Yeah.
Probably on the second night at Cambridge, and he came into the footlights, and so I claim to be one of the first people to say, look, that it wasn't just good. This is something really special, and indeed it made him, you know, a certain theatrical star straight away. It was an extraordinary performance. I pinched a bit when I played Henry V, so
All right, yeah.
I have a lot to thank him for, but yeah, extraordinary actor. Wigan, was that?
Yeah, he was from Wigan, yeah, which isn't
that came out. I saw him being painted on the television just the other night, and there were 3 artists. One who was also from Wigan, and he chose her painting. He said, I can see you've got the Wigan in me.
Yeah.
But no, interesting when you said that you've been to the same school.
What was he like at school? Was he acting at school?
Oh yeah, well, like I say, we weren't there, but yes. Oh, the school is very proud of him.
Of course, you weren't there at the same time. Yes.
Yeah. No, but he's celebrating, and he's come back a few times. He's given lectures and sort of tried to get everybody inspired into acting and going with that kind of thing.
And the drama studio, the drama centre at the school is now called the Ian McKellen Drama Studio in his honour.
Haileybury's got the Akeborn Theatre in it now.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Because
actually, Millfield School has got the Meyer Theatre, but that's because it was started by our uncle called Jack Meyer, who had no theatre whatsoever. But we do have a theatre named after us down in Millfield School, which is a totally another story.
That's brilliant. Yeah. But I mean,
acting right from the start, to go back to your thing, and through school, and then slightly different pathways into the profession, and then suddenly coming together, working with Peter Brook in a production of Midsummer Night's Dream. Didn't work out particularly well, but then we worked through several projects, which we'll probably go on to talk about, and. So, which perhaps, you know, where we learnt a lot about ourselves and working together, in fact. And so we were ready to do a James Bond by then.
What's it like, sort of acting alongside his brothers, or do you like doing that, or do you prefer acting alone?
Well, there are 2 things about that. I mean, yes, I was a bit put out when Tony said he was going to be an actor, suddenly, because I was still at drama school, because you know, it's a difficult profession, and it's hard enough creating your own name, and to have somebody else with half the same name and the same face is going to be. But of course, we have had some pretty good gigs from the the question of being Peter Brook, actually, who's probably the most iconic figure we have worked with. Was the first to cast us as twins, and we just because he thought to be in the fairy band of this amazing white box production that he did, 2 fairies just happened to be twins, which is a rather cool idea. We found we could, and then of course there's James Bond and so on. But so it's half and half, wanting to create your own life and your own personality and all the rest of it, and then finding that actually if you can play, we could play on the twin thing. There was something you could kind of psych yourself into it. Instead of trying to be different, you could relax into a more kind of mirror image situation and get onto that vibe. And of course, if you went with that in mind to casting directors and crossed your legs at the same time, they all go, "Oh, fantastic!" It was something you could sort of home in on. And
I think we got it in the end after we investigated how different we were, in fact, as twins. But of course, you know, directors, 2 people exactly the same. This is really exciting, you know. Whereas, we wanted to be different. You wanted to become an actor to prove to your parents and everyone in the world that you were you. You weren't what they thought you were. Maybe I played Romeo. I played Henry V. I played Gerasim for Tolstoy, and you know, and I played a policeman in a pantomime. You know, I mean that was terrific. I loved those. And yes, there was some difficulty at first actually playing together, but we did work through it. And when it came to, in the end, you know, when you're in the back of the taxi and he says, "Oh yeah, what have you done?" You know, it's okay to say James Bond. You know, so we did pretty well. We did pretty well out of it in the end. I think.
Absolutely.
Because that, I mean, whenever I suppose casting directors were like, right, we need some twins for this film or this production, you must have been like, hey, we're in with a chance here.
we were in a little, exactly 40 years ago, we were the go-to twins.
Yeah.
And this year has been taken up with remembering that, because we were also in the Draftsman's Contract by Peter Greenaway, which came out at about the same time. And it doesn't last. There's only so much you can do as twins. And you end up doing bubblegum, chewing gum advertisements and things. And you think, we can't, there's not much further we can go on this. But interestingly enough, Tony and I started in separate companies. Tony did a lot more provincial acting on like ordinary stage, as it were. But both of us worked in more extraordinary companies. You with Stephen Burkhoff, and me with a guy called Lindsay Kemp, which is kind of chalk and cheese. Stephen Burkhoff is super macho, and Lindsay is wonderfully camp, and but both extraordinary
both very
creators of theatre,
physical theatre, very, you know, which stood us in good stead.
Absolutely,
for circus performance. And some people even thought we must have been. Apparently, they were based on circus or cabaret performances, but the couple that they were based on didn't really fancy the idea of being stuffed into cannons or, you know, falling off trains and so on. There weren't that many options, you know, for twins. You know, they saw quite a few muscular type heavies, and but David had just been up for a gong for The Tempest. I had just played a Russian waiter in a film called Duck Hunting by Vampilov, and so the timing was quite good. In fact, I'd played 3 Russians prior to my to Mischka.
Yeah.
Mischka Grischka. Everyone get the names always get mixed up. I don't think they knew, because they're never mentioned in the script, of course, except once when I'm on the top of the train. But it's, sometimes I have to think very hard. But if I shout out Mischka, that means I must have been Grischka.
Well, in the actual credits, the end credits, you're down as twin 1 and twin 2, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, you'd obviously given up trying to sort out who the fuck is who, yes.
They didn't know.
Can I just say, though, that shouting Mischka, and he's not on the podcast today, but I've got to mention it. One of our co-hosts, Rob, he tells this story about when he was at school, you know, the knife throwing, you shout Mischka and you throw the knife. When anybody at school ever asked him like for a pen or a pencil or something, instead of giving it to him, he just used to go Mischka, throw the pen right at.
I love that story.
That's a fabulous story. I mean, it's totally incorrect. I don't throw the knife after saying the word. That's a completely different thing. But I love it. I've got. You mean we're really iconic? That's what, yeah. There was one moment when we first do our first training signing session, because we didn't do anything like that for years and years and years, and suddenly it all picked up. And we were in the first signing traffic, and there was a Dalek in among all the people. There was also James Cagney across the road. No, Mickey Rooney, what about across the road? But the Dalek went past him and said, "Don't you throw your knives at me." And I thought, we've made it. We are
Yeah.
iconic national anthems, and now people who know who you are.
Well, you mentioned the circus then before when you were training and stuff. How much of that stuff did you do? The knife throwing and the jumping around?
We had a very good, lovely guy who taught us how to throw those rather large knives, which were by no means throwing knives, actually. And there's at least one tree in Holland Park, which I don't think survived. You know, I practiced quite a lot throwing knives there. Big Bowie knives, they were. He was a guy who had, I think it's called an Apache dance, and he had a young girl who he was probably having an affair with, who he threw knives at in his show, and that was how it was done. And he is on the camera in the long shot throwing knives at a model on the stage.
A dummy, I may say.
A dummy. He managed to keep the dummy's ear off.
So, you know, I'm glad because I mean, if he does it, I trust him, you know, but just as well. So it's interesting. I always maintained that it looks like, certainly on set, it looks like we were around much more than we were, because there was us two, there was our trainer our teacher who was in our costume. There was a dummy that was looking just like me. And then Roger Moore puts on the costume as well. So the costume, which is really quite cool, I think. We liked the costume, helped a lot. Emma Porteous, wonderful wardrobe lady. I maintain it's slightly based on what Peter Sellers wore in The Mouse That Roared.
Right, okay.
His everyman character, you know, he played I think 3 or 4 different characters, but it's same shirt, same waistcoat, certainly.
Well, that you mentioned Emma Porteous. Peter, her husband, is in a scene with you, isn't he?
He's in it, yes, yeah. They're a lovely couple. Yeah, he's gone now, and but I think he's with the bomb. He's with I think he's with you actually, while they're setting the bomb up. Very complicated, you know.
It is a complicated script, isn't it? It really is.
Well, don't ask me, you know, which bomb is in which train, or you know why or how, because I never quite get it. I think actually that it's part of the twin syndrome. If you like, I discovered this quite recently, really, that it's a twin sort of theme running through Octopussy right at the beginning, to do a sort of cahier du cinéma, you know. We went to Paris, so I thought, you know, let's talk about, you know, movies. But no, at the beginning, Roger Moore puts on the moustache and becomes a twin and meets his twin.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, have us were introduced as twins.
Yeah, 009's a clown, isn't he?
And then he ends up as a clown, you know, and sees his twin. He goes into a caravan within 30 seconds, has put on a whole crown makeup or whatever. And so I maintain there's a sort of twin theme, you know.
You've got the eggs as well,
maybe the twin carriages, you know, are all part of that.
Yeah, that was something one of our friends of the show, David, Licensed to Queer, that's something he's picked up on recently. I think it seems really clever and intentional.
Yeah,
I think.
Oh, really? I thought I was the only person.
No. I'm
wondering.
This guy David mentioned it, and and also as Tom was just saying before, the eggs, like there's 2 of the same eggs, and you don't know which is which and everything. So there does seem to be something throughout the whole film about it. Yeah. So who knows?
I've got a nice story about Roger Moore.
Oh, good.
Oh, everyone's asked, you know, what's he like? No one has anything bad to say about him, because he was a genuinely nice person. I found myself in the same waiting room, dentist's waiting room with him. I thought, oh my God, that's him. I went across the room and said, I nearly killed you 7 years ago. I said, you won't remember, will you? He said, oh, well, I remember the shirts. because we were all wearing these purple shirts. He obviously thought that was not a terribly warm thing to say. And later, when I was leaving, putting on my coat, he left the waiting room and came over and said how nice it was to see me again.
Oh.
The nice thing for a star to do.
Yeah.
He didn't have to go up from his chair. Apropos of the circus, you were asking how daunting that was. I do remember suddenly there was this news that we were doing the circus scene the next day. And my God, we hadn't had a knife lesson for quite a while. Oh my God, we're on stage, as it were. And we did have an audience, you know, all around. And this little brat came up to me and said, I bet you can't really throw those knives. I've got to show them I can throw these knives. And so there was a time when I was throwing knives at an empty target, and I did manage to get 3 in, but it was kind of said, I've got to show him. I'll show the little brat. But it was a bit unnerving.
It was a great. You probably know better than me, but I thought or seemed to have heard that the circus was Barbara Broccoli's first kind of project in the whole of the franchise. You know,
right.
That was her lot, and so we had this incredible atmosphere. Actually, she, you know, got enough audience. Obviously, you know, it's not packed, but enough audience so that, you know, you get the sense of an audience. And then the man in the being shot from the cannon and various. And it had a very good atmosphere, you know. I remember we'd been to the circus. We'd been to Billy Smart's circus in the old days, when they had lions and tigers. Of course, they don't do that anymore. That was my one note that John gave me when I was actually performing, was taking the dagger off the target and throwing it back. And I remember him saying, "Oh, get on with it, Tony." But I maintain it was the right thing to do. It was, you know, it's just a performer, for goodness sake. You may say we got a good review from Pauline Kael, an iconic American critic from New York, and she said it was an inelegant, I can't pronounce that title. But she liked the idea of, you know, twins throwing knives at each other. So there was being a New Yorker and very au fait with family problems and sibling rivalries. She liked that very much.
Well, yes. Yeah, there you are, three brothers. Yes, of course. Almost every American play is about brothers fighting for their love for the father or something. Yeah. Just spending as much time as possible among those beautiful girls in the middle of the stage.
Yeah, strapped to a target by lovely girls, and you know, I helped them love them. I just felt very comfortable.
Well, you mentioned the women of Octopussy. Some of our favourite. I mean, Maud Adams is amazing, and you've got Christina Wayborn and all the Octopussy girls and the girls in the circus. It's amazing.
Maud, so nice. I actually walked into her caravan by mistake once. Happily, she was just sitting there reading a book, but she was very about it, which is the only time we actually met. But it was a complete mistake. But she has been to some of the signings, and she's so wonderful and generous and giving with the people.
Yeah, we thought it's our first signings, which we didn't do for a long time. The girls, can we call them the girls, had actually been doing it for straight away. They were part of the Octopussy, the Octopussy circus, literally. But we hadn't done it for a while. Then suddenly we were kind of got hold of, because somebody had found photograph of us on a website for rather a lot of money, and it was a relative, and he just couldn't believe, so we started signing, but the first signings we had were with Maud, and she taught us how to do it, because it wasn't just a matter of signing. Thank you very much. It was to do with talking to people, and she was always charming and terrific. And also, I think, especially in Octopussy, of course, Roger Moore was getting on a bit, and there were some jokes about that. But there was a real kind of rapport between the two of them, I thought, having worked before, and that contributes, I think, to the whole sense of the whether it works or not.
Yeah. Roger's best Bond girl for us, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. Tony, a few moments ago, you mentioned you referenced that review and what an inspired choice it was to have twins kind of as the villains. Can I ask, in the audition process and the casting, how much of the role did you know? Did you know that you were going to be villains? And did that make it quite was it quite a daunting audition to go for, or how did the process work?
So I think we were both fairly confident. And we went to Pinewood and had some terrible makeup put on, with this wig put on. So I thought, well, if you can cope with that wig, then you can do anything, basically. and I remember walking in, striding in, looking as energetic as possible. As I said, we both sort of worked physically, which helped. And I remember, very short, Broccoli saying, "Can you look really evil?" And David was slightly behind me, and apparently, gave him a good evil. And I just grinned, and he sort of laughed. Oh, Tony's laughing, but apparently that was okay. Saying, what? That's can be dangerous. That's when you should be wary of your heavy man,
a good combination
when he's smiling, that worked, and we got it pretty quickly.
He was a little intimidating, because you go into this room and it was this kind of semicircle of people, with Broccoli in the middle and the casting lady and she's got a name, who's passed away now. But it's like something out of the war, the war room in, and you are, and indeed we have these wigs put on us. My joke is that I went back with my dressing gown on and with a little wig, and I looked in the mirror, and all I could see was the vision of my mother when she'd just come from that. And I thought, that's great. I'm playing a villain, and I look like my mother. And someone said, "No, it's all right. The leather boots will help," which indeed they did, and the knives.
Yeah, they were cool.
Yeah.
But you can see the kind of it was the 80s, the days of bouffant wigs.
I didn't know they were. Were they actually wigs in the final film?
Yeah.
Oh
wow. Oh yes.
It's not black.
Oh, good. That we've grown into them. That's why.
Yeah. Wow.
Convincing.
Yeah.
I mean, you still both got a full head of hair now, and I just thought they were the same. It was the same hair.
I tell you, and we don't dye it. Neither of us have gone grey. It's weird.
Yeah. You're all right.
Or lose it. It's in the genes. Yes. It's hopeless. I go in.
Our dad was the same.
Right.
If I go up for bank managers in commercials now, it's hopeless. I'm sitting in a room full of grey-haired people with no hair at all. But you get more parts if you dyed your hair grey. It may well be
mental.
Slightly linked to my last question as well. Honestly speaking, were you Bond fans going into it? Had you grown up watching James Bond films, or were you quite apathetic? Or
our first experiences with James Bond was the cartoon in the Daily Express. That's how you. I remember Dr. No. It was a little cartoon I think it was the Daily Express, and of course the pan paperbacks, which were the nearest thing to, well, not pornography, but they also, the last 2 sentences of certain chapters always sexual frisson, as they sank back onto the bed. So that was really why you read them at school. But the early ones, yes, Dr. No, and especially the early ones.
Dr. No, I remember vividly, and of course, and the first thing that happens to James is somebody having a massage. Oh, perhaps that's Goldfinger. Yeah, we met a woman who, but that was very exciting. The idea of a massage, but we didn't grow up. We were just growing up, I suppose. But we certainly saw the films, and of course those early ones are fantastic. You know, they're incredible character. And when we were asked, I must admit, to audition with, I thought, well, that's exciting. And the fact that Lotte Lenya had done a wonderful job in From Russia with Love.
And my favorite, you know, that is my favorite, Russia with Love.
I've done Brecht, you know, when she sang for Brecht and Kurt Weill, and you know, so I thought, well, if she does it, you know, it's okay, you know.
You're part of that same Bond villain fandom, aren't you? You know, the family of Bond villains, I think.
Well, I'd be flattered.
Yeah,
no, it's true. Interestingly enough, Stephen Burkov, you had worked with Stephen Burkov in, you know, little fringe shows with 20 people in the audience, sort of versions of Franz Kafka, and which is very esoteric and suddenly we were in this big movie together, and it was very exciting and rather fun.
I rehearsed the first production of The Trial in a village hall in Islington with Stephen, you know, and then suddenly, you know, we're doing James Bond. I mean, that's part of the, you know, the wonderful sort of camaraderie or the show business in England. I think it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
How is Stephen? Is he exuberant in real life as he is on screen?
He's mellowed slightly. In age, yes. He used to be very well. I worked with him eventually, but he used to have a terrible reputation of being terrible to people. I have to say that. I mean, he probably said himself that he had that rather terrifying reputation. He did ask. To give you an instance, he said, well, David, when are you going to come and work with me? Because I was working with Lindsay. He said, I said, well, you're also butch in your company. He said, because they were all going around in leather jackets. He said, oh, it's just an act, David. It's just an act.
He did have a reputation for rubbing people up the wrong way, and certain managements too, so that, you know, opportunities got lost. But I always had a great time with him, and a lot of laughs, and I have a lot to thank him for.
It was always very nice to both of us.
Yeah. Well, I assume you'll all be reunited at some stage this year.
Yeah.
For the 40th anniversary of Octopussy. I know there are a few events going on.
They're mounting up.
Yes, indeed. We sort of used to think we were kind of famous for a day, you know, once a year. And now at least half a dozen now. You know,
we've got half a dozen days where we get the stars, yes.
Oh, brilliant.
Next one is, HMS Belfast. You might be there.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And the Nene Valley Railway.
Yeah.
Being a get together. I think it's sort of raising money for the railway.
Yeah.
Wow. We're going up there and sitting on the railway track and going for a ride. Whether I will dare to climb up on top of the train.
Keep pushing their luck, David. I will be very sure the insurance will cover.
Well, I wouldn't be moving, of course. But, I mean, have to say, you know, people say, is that really a train moving? Yes, that train is moving.
It is now 11:45. The performance begins at 3, allowing for delays. Set the bomb to detonate at 3:45. We must leave the base by 3:15. I take it none of you will be late.
To skip forward to that, maybe, yes. I mean, they did suddenly say, do you think you can, it was a Sunday, do you think you could be on top of the train during the fight? Because it was a fight scene, you know. Normally you'd expect a combat person to be doing it, but they had to show somebody's face. There were 3 people. Roger Moore wasn't going to be up there. No. And the wonderful Martin Grace was there. And I have to say, Paul Weston was the fight director, but it was Martin who we chatted to before, because he's the most intelligent and delightful person beforehand. And I said, well, I've got to fight you on a train. Just hang on to me, David, and we'll sway backwards and forwards, which is what we're doing, as you see. Yeah. But it was him who really guided me through that scene, and I felt safe playing it with him. And frankly, I crazily just thought it was the most exciting thing I'd ever done. And I remember thinking, oh, that's rather cool when I saw the Lone Ranger doing it on television a long time ago as a child. And it was like a sort of fantasy that I was living through. The train wasn't going very fast, but I think 20 miles an hour or so.
It's fantastic. I mean, extraordinary. And David, I was always much better at climbing trees than me, for instance. And I'm not sure I could do that.
But it was also because we'd done a lot of physical theatre a bit.
And before physical theatre, we were romping in the orchard next to the little cottage we grew up in, and, you know, climbing the trees and falling down dead, and, you know, the whole thing was like an extension. I mean, you did say, or you were wondering what research we did and so on. And as I said, I played 3 Russians, and we definitely thought about where we had come from, a little village somewhere, perhaps in Ukraine. We were definitely circus performers that were somehow hijacked, you know.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That way around.
And you know, I'd come from quite a poor family, and it was sort of just another job, but probably well paid.
About climbing trees, you could go and just climb trees. In the olden days, health and safety didn't come into it. It's true. It's true. You were romping around, and I remember a teacher in school coming up to me and with great sympathy said, "Is there anything you can do that's better than your brother?" And I said, "Well, I can climb trees."
And climb on top of trains and wrestle with James Bond. I mean,
all comes.
Mischka!
But yes, dear Martin Grace, we will miss him immensely when I got to Neen Valley. He had that terrible accident, as you said, the next day. They didn't tell me about that, which it was a pity. I would have run to the hospital to see him again, because it really was wonderful what we did together. And it all happened so quickly, you know. Yeah. We didn't even have time to sort of enjoy it and think about it.
Yeah.
But he recovered from that. And it was later that he I wish I'd seen him again after those days, because it was something. It was quite special. And although I may be smiling too much when I'm attacking, because I just think this is fun. I don't do the falling off the train. That is somebody else, of course.
Really?
But it's my, as I always say, it's my 15 minutes of fame. That's.
You've mentioned all the physical acting and your previous experience of that, but it's not just that with you guys as villains. The scenes where you're looking at each other, and the slower scenes where you're in the room, and kind of, as we've already mentioned, the Bond series had never had anything like that before, and it was scary. It was you had such a presence, the two of you, and obviously you're twins, but clearly you're very individual. But I'm just wondering if in the film, were you directed to mirror each other in that way? Because you're like really, you're very closely aligned and reflecting each other, and that appears more in the film than it is now, if you know what I mean. And that must be really hard to reflect someone else, because other actors don't really need to ever do that. It must have been really, really tough.
Well, yes, as I said,
that's a very interesting observation.
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought of that, in fact. But I mean, that's because we didn't have to act. That's sort of what happens instinctively, just because we are twins, and so that probably credit to John Glenn for not saying, "Oh, you've got to be either side of the frame."
Yes, he certainly
each other. He doesn't do that.
He never did any
the fact, as I said, about he just told me to speed it up a bit once, and that was it. But I mean, it's an interesting observation. I hadn't really been conscious of that, and we certainly didn't work on it or anything like that. Interestingly, that we never were sort of plotted or positioned, so that we were unlike Peter Greenaway, who was very conscious that he wanted us both sides of the frame and mirroring each other completely and things like that. That's so a credit to Brooke and to John Glenn for not doing that. Knowing that actually what was interesting was that it just worked. It was there. And interesting that you've noticed it, I must admit.
As I said, it was something we found we could sort of psych into. Desperately trying to be different, you could sink into being the same, and without too much any thought in it. But I do think that's one of the reasons that the characters do come across quite strongly in the film, because to be honest, in a James Bond film, everyone is acting their socks off. This is part of the game. They're all playing a James Bond character, which is slightly different, slightly bigger than life, and that in what you're talking about, we're not acting at all. It's just it. And so that's why it comes across on the movies. I mean, John accused me of being half asleep at one point, actually. I was so it's maybe the fact that we were both rather laid back. It's the magic of film acting. You don't have to do too much. But it's what's going on inside, and inside is we've both been brothers for a very long time.
I mean, acting is to do with discovering yourself as well as discovering techniques and how to dance and move and fight sword fights and speak verse, and we've done a lot of that really through work, as I said, from Midsummer Night's Dream onward, and so that's interesting. It probably paid off because we discovered a lot about ourselves by working together. Although David did drama school and I just did lots of exercises. we were quite clean, Grotowski, and really into experimental theatre and things like that.
No, I was going to say, just in terms of the fate of the two twins. So I think it's Mischka who gets hit down by the cannon. Do we know where? And then he gets put into the cannon. Yeah. Did you? Was there anything more in the script about what happened to him from there, or was he dead? Was he just unconscious? Was there anything else?
I always assumed that that was it.
Yeah.
If you get hit on the head by a cannon, I guess the idea that I survived and Dave's Grischka's death was in vain. That's very interesting. Maybe, alas, perhaps as a sequel we missed out on.
Yeah, could still happen.
Yeah. Right. This is a subtlety, complicated narrative because James Bond pinches your shirt for some reason or other. I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah, why does he get?
He's not twin.
Yeah. And ends up, for another reason I'm not quite sure why, on top of the train. And I am, for some other reason, climbing on top of the train. Goodness only knows why. And I think that James Bond, because he's got that shirt on, is Mischka, which is why I say Mischka.
Yeah.
This subtlety is actually may not quite register in the narrative, but that's why I rushed towards him. And then, of course, you find that James Bond wants to kill me instead of embrace me as a brother. Yeah. So that's so it goes. But indeed,
yeah, and that's where the two of you, Bond and you, have a bit of a wrestle and then fall off the side of the train. Obviously, we spoke about, and then that's where we have that, in the woods.
Oh.
Grischka's. It's interesting. The woods is, of course, the studio.
Yeah, right.
A lot of that goes on, by the way. I mean, the first scene starts in East Berlin and goes to a wood outside Pinewood, and then further up a weir somewhere in three entirely different locations. Yeah. And we do the scene in the hut where I try and stab James Bond with a knife is in the studio. I mean, there is a story I can tell you about that. I mean, I knew this was my big close up.
Yeah.
With this is for my brother.
Yeah.
We did the scene. We did the scene with Roger being lovely and up against the wall and me trying to look fierce, and then he left, and they started taking away the scenery because they were setting up another scene somewhere else. The assistant director said the boards were put all around the camera. Now, David, if you could just move towards the camera, hit that spot, throw one dagger, hit that spot, throw another one, and go to your third mark, and then say the line and throw that, and try not hit the lens of the camera with the knives. And you thought, this is it. This is the moment I've been waiting for all day, indeed all my life. I am having my in a main movie, and they're taking away the scenery, and there's just me and a camera. And that's kind of when people say, what do you do about film acting? Yes, learn to hit your mark and say your line. But it was quite funny, and it's sort of come on all right. Came off all right. I think that I fall onto the ground in the hut. Were touching the dagger. I mean, it's actually, that might not be in every cut of the scene because you can't show too much violence in James Bond movies.
Yeah.
And actually, I think very often you just cut to the skull in the march.
Yeah, that was always on our video recorded from ITV. Didn't have the next bit where he very clearly does kill you.
Yeah.
brother. And that's for 009.
That's for 009.
Oh,
yeah.
Which is the guy who was killed right at the beginning of the film, which is, I think maybe, which maybe people have forgotten about by then.
That is an incredible scene, that one at the beginning of the film. It's so, I mean, this is this juxtaposition again, is that you've just had Roger Moore dressing up as this Toro, and they've had the Acro Star, and then you go back into this East Berlin, and the scene of the 009 with the balloon throwing, the balloon popping, and then all that, it's harrowing. It's a fantastic scene, and credit to both of you. It's a brilliant scene.
It was in East Berlin. I went by myself because it's just me climbing over the barbed wire fence to begin with, and it was just by the wall.
Well, but then it was in Parkwood, and then it was in by the Weir, which was somewhere else. There's the magic of cinema. It's like three different places. Yeah, Arthur Worcester, second unit. He did a great job. And I've heard it praised many times, and somebody suggested it should have been, the pre-credit sequence or whatever. But I think the fact that there is no dialogue or whatever does make it.
It's a good chance.
Does make it work.
It's a good contrast with the jokiness.
I teach. I teach. I've done home tutors too, and I always think that people should be taught cinema a bit. I showed a film in Brest Short Film Festival once, and I was asked to go to a school and talk about cinema because they used to have classes in cinema. This is France, French. It's as important as literature is to learn about films. So occasionally I say, look, for instance, let's look at the first scene of Great Expectations with Finlay Curry, with wonderful meeting, which we would have seen at our school, which showed long before telephones or TVs in the study or mobile phones. Goodness, yes. We had a film every night, every Saturday night. And one projector, so we had to wait while the reel of film was changed or whatever. But anyway, we would have seen Great Expectations, and that wonderful presentation was Finlay Curry. And then I say, interestingly enough, that gets taken up in James Bond, and so I can see that clip.
I remember Arthur saying, coming back the next day, we've seen the rushes; they're really good. We've got that wonderful reflection of the light on the daggers.
Yeah.
And then he looked at my face and said, and of course you look terrific in it.
It's amazing.
What about me?
Because the audience just see one of you chasing this clown. They're already like, what's going on here? And then he bumps into a twin.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, what's going on?
It's brilliant.
That does register quite well, does it? I mean,
yes. I mean, Harry, you were showing your kids yesterday this,
I was just going to say, I was showing my daughter it yesterday, and it completely took her by surprise, and, also all kinds of questions like, but what? He was over there, but now he's here, and why is he as a clown? Where's he going? There's so many questions. But that's, for anyone watching, it's, there's just people one person pursuing another, but so many questions coming. Yeah. So it's a brilliant scene you're part of.
It's interesting because we just did it. When Cubby Broccoli, in his charming way, said, "How did it go, David?" after the scene, I said, "Oh well, I think it went quite well," because I guess it was. I thought it didn't read as if it was going to be terribly exciting. I had the temerity to be criticizing a James Bond script. No, he said rather sweetly, yes, well, it's true. A lot of these things don't look very much on this page, but they come to life when you do them, which is interesting. And I suppose it's the same thing with reading the script. This is what we were doing. You said, okay, you just do it. And
you get John Barry's music as well. John Barry's score for that is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As he is.
John Glenn, is a storyteller, very good storyteller. He started doing, action sequences. I think action sequences by definition have to have that storytelling in them. And physical, and that can I think in the later James Bonds can be quite confusing sometimes. And I remember sitting in Paris, surrounded by cineasts. They take their films very seriously in Paris. And I said, I sort of miss, this just ability to tell a story, which John Glenn had. And they silently nodded to you. 7 8.
So we're definitely nodding.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you talked with him?
We have, we were on. We spoke to him at length, and hopefully we'll meet him at the HMS Belfast. But he's just a wonderful, generous human being, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I don't think he didn't realise how loved he is by Bond fans, because he's such a big part of the franchise with everything he's done. Fantastic.
He was an assistant director on earlier ones, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was, and an editor. Yeah.
So he knows how to cut a scene, and he knows where it's going to go in his brain. Yeah.
And he's been very nice about us too. So I thought,
no.
So can I ask? So when was it that you started getting into the Bond fan scene and doing the events and stuff?
Well, only about 10 or so years ago. Definitely this century. Somebody, as I said, saw and on the internet a photo was going for quite a lot of money, and it was as if we were kind of reclusive. So that suddenly seemed like a good thing to do, and maybe it's only just paying off because apparently there are still people who want to meet us. So that's
definitely
great. And we had a 30-year get together in Pinewood. And we must have been doing something a bit before then too, but not much.
Right.
We met David Williams, who said that he'd grown up on James Bond movies, and I thought, yes, he must have been going to see them just as Octopussy came out.
Yeah.
So I caught his eye.
He actually knew who we were,
and he said, "Oh my God!"
Yeah.
It's not actors at all. But it was great fun to meet a genuine fan.
I wanted that was on the Roger Moore's day at Pinewood, and I wanted to thank him for his books. I bought one of his books for my great nieces, and they loved it, And I said I genuinely wanted to thank him for that, and he was very good about signing some other books that that they all got a bit later on. Now they've all grown up, alas.
But this was just before the kind of big merchandising franchise tradition about, there aren't any little models of us available.
We need some.
We would buy them, definitely.
You would be very distinctive that you would work as action figures, definitely.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, yes, it's too late now, but I mean, you know what I mean. And then suddenly we realized there were these big things going around where you sat behind a desk and sold photographs with your autograph. I have to say, it's rather fun doing it when there are two of you, actually.
Yeah.
If you're sitting all by yourself with your little stall with your photographs. It can be a bit lonesome if people are not coming through all the time. But with a couple of us, it's quite fun, whether it's doing or not. And so the signing, well, we usually go to maybe one a year of a signing thing.
But
maybe
this is
could and should do more.
Probably tail off now after this year a bit. But no, the whole celebrity thing, culture really sort of exploded in the 90s. I remember a French couple, a friend of mine, came over and they wanted to go to a fair, a sort of cinema fair I think it was in Westminster Hall, and probably the end of the 80s. And that was all that was going. It was, you know, the Westminster Hall and a lot of stalls, people with interesting sort of stills from films and so on. But none of the great sort of merchandise or, you know, razzmatazz or, and I can't remember there being any celebrities there, as it were. Nowadays, it's extraordinary. You get the masked singer, don't you? And they have to guess who's in the mask, and in the end they take off the mask, and there's invariably somebody I have no clue as to who they are. Oh my God, I'm quite behind on my celebrities.
They must be given a list of possibilities, must they? I mean, well, when they're trying to guess who it is, but anyway, that's another thing.
Well, if there is ever a masked singer where there's two of them together, my first guess will not be Ant and Dec. It'll be David and Tony Meyer.
Well, you've actually got a piece of merchandise with you there, David. You've got this mug.
The octopus. Yes, I got the Octopussy mug. That's true.
Can you show it? Could you show it?
The only one I've ever seen, actually. And then maybe I had to pay a $5 for it.
But we should have pinched the knives, you know, or whatever. Really slow on the uptake.
Yes, I should have pinched some because they're worth a fortune, aren't they? You can get memorabilia from the movie. We had a wonderful weekend in Paris last November. The James Bond fan club in Paris.
Yes, the French fan club. Yes, yeah.
The French were so fond of James Bond. I thought the French were always a little critical of things, especially true. English films were a sort of contradiction in terms, but they loved James Bond, and they took us. They gave us a first-class Euro trip to Paris, wined and dined us beautifully. We were interviewed on a stage with a big David Tony Meyer, and put together a beautiful little clip of all our best bits. And we had an interview in front of an audience of 200 people or so, all of whom wanted autographs at the end. It was a wonderful weekend. Really, really lovely people.
Well, they are. You are loved, like I say, Bond.
Yeah.
It's not like other sort of fandoms. I think as the longer it goes on, the more legendary everyone becomes, and the more you're appreciated. I know it's the 40th anniversary, but
well, yeah, it is extraordinary. You mentioned the word iconic once or twice.
Yeah.
In your things, of course, what was it like working with the iconic Derek Jarman?
Yeah.
Well, he was a mate. You know, he was a friend of mine. He lived down over there in Butler's Wharf. There used to be fabulous parties on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And that's the only time you'd come down here on Butler's Wharf. When Derek Jarman and and Andrew Logan and Peter Logan, his brother, all had 3 stories on this deserted wharf. Right. And you never came here except on New Year's Eve. Right. Well, they had terrific parties, and there's a wonderful scene of artistic people. I mean, Derek was a painter when I first knew him. And then he started doing the little Super 8s, and I stayed one night at Butler's Wharf, and we were friends. And then he did Sebastian, and it was just kind of very arty and very gay. And then he wanted to do The Tempest, and he came and said, do you want to come and do Ferdinand? And I said, yes, sir. Of course. It was Shakespeare. I didn't know the play very well since I've known it a lot now. I'd done a lot of theatre taking my clothes off, actually. The body was slightly better than the acting at that time. We had a wonderful time. I said, have I got to appear with no clothes on again? Surely I could. He said, well, all right, we'll give you a test. So I came out of the North Sea with a pair of sort of linen shorts on, tied up with a bit of string. And he said, it's no good. You just look like somebody in a bad reproduction of Robinson Crusoe. No, we really want you coming here. So it'll be more iconic if you come out with no clothes on, which I do. It was freezing cold. I heard the people talking about life expectancy in that North Sea at March the 25th. It was my birthday, by the way. How symbolic is that? Coming out of the sea on your birthday with no clothes on. Brandy waiting for me. It was all right. Yes, early lives. Then that was in 79. I get confused. Was that before or after?
David, there will be many actresses who could repeat that sort of conversation that it had on a set.
I
was in. One thing you didn't discover was that I was in Barry Lyndon, actually. With Stephen, which Stephen Burkoff was in, of course, and it was wonderful. And Kubrick had said, "Why don't you bring your boys down, and you can be in Barry's naughty scene." And we said, "Yeah, that sounds great, yeah." And indeed, we were at one of those candlelit scenes, because he had the special lens which didn't need any reinforcement. The candles in Rossman's contract had to have little lights behind them. But he had this lens which could pick up on candles, and we were each given a partner to caress during Barry's naughty scene. But and then, sure enough, we noticed that people were going around saying, talking to the girls, and it was like, if you could take your top off, we'll just give you a bit of extra money, actually, Didn't happen to the woman that I was kissing. She said no, very, very quickly. And I thought, oh dear, this isn't going very well, really. And I said, I thought I'd charm her. So I said, you're very good at kissing. And she said, no, I'm not. My boyfriend says I'm cold as fish. And I didn't get the right card on Barry's naughty scene, and you will not recognise me really. All I can see is my But anyway, just apropos, I was telling those sort of stories to France, so that they loved it.
Yeah. Brilliant. They would.
David, sorry. So David, I've got to ask. I am a massive Inspector Morse fan. Can I just ask? Because obviously you were in Inspector Morse, and it was Danny Boyle was directing as well.
Danny Boyle was directing. Yes.
Yeah.
Before, I think it was because I'd worked with Lindsay, because he knew about Lindsay. I mean, who was an iconic figure. Lindsay taught David Bowie how to be David Bowie. With a mask and the not so much the movement, but the stillness, how to project it. So David Bowie was not successful until he'd had the Lindsay Kemp charm, theatrical charm, injected into him, and I think Danny must have seen me doing that. So he kindly gave me this tiny part. I was a professor or something in the thing, and it was a TV part. It all went quite quickly and things, but actually he could see I was very nervous because I hadn't done a lot of TV, and I was just kind of sort of rigid a little. And he just was moving around the curtain, and I just felt his hand on my shoulder. It's gonna be all right. Just a little touch. I mean, he's a magic person. Terrific.
He's from around here. He's from Bury, where we're from as well.
Yeah. Lindsay taught Kate Bush too, didn't he?
Yes. I mean, he was doing these wonderful
things. And if you go to Australia, you'll hear many people who remember ABBA and Lindsay Kemp. They, had profound influence on Australian culture, and people who have gone on to make films in Australia very successfully.
Amazing.
It was yes, all that wow, unbelievable comes from the dance classes that Lindsay was giving in Floral Street. They were a kind of dance that was just taking off in the 70s, and everyone was buying leg warmers and singing "I'm going to be famous forever" and all the rest of it. And Lindsay was doing fabulous dance workshops where you threw yourself in agony on the floor and then rose like angels to glide across the room. And that was when I think and Kate Bush certainly went to those. And it was interesting times.
Yeah.
I have to say, we're talking about the 70s, where theatre really had an impact in the shows that were going on, whether they were like the people's shows, the strange shows, and all the rest of it, or the bigger operas, and so on. They really had an impact. I mean, when we're doing with going around the world with A Midsummer Night's Dream, students were climbing through the windows to be smuggled into the auditorium in Warsaw because the party people had taken all the tickets, but that was what people wanted to see. It was the medium. Then it went on to, now, you know, Marvel Comics have taken over the movies, it's all the, you know, and dance at one point was much more important, and theatre doesn't have that impact that it had in those days. But when physical theatre was taking off in England with Shared Experience and Burkoff and Lindsay and Ken, it was an exciting time, a very exciting time indeed.
Amazing.
Well, no, you have worked.
And I learned a lot actually from Lindsay about stillness and focus. And movement, and you all worked fabulously in the circus scene. Suddenly, suddenly it all came together.
It's interesting that we had all the experiences that we had in theatre and in other films and so on. I mean, you guys, you found a copy of The Third Walker. I mean, somebody you mentioned on your
well.
Now, where did you see that, for goodness sake? I hadn't seen it. It was a film we made in Cape Breton in Canada. And it was a bit of a disaster, really. Interestingly, with Colleen Dewhurst, a wonderful actress. She was Canadian, we just Googled. So maybe she was wanting to support Canadian film. And William Shatner.
Yeah.
And a wonderful French actress called Monique Mercure.
The court orders that the custody of the child be restored to his rightful mother, Marie Blanchard.
Two mothers give birth at the same time, and years later, their twins unveiled a mysterious secret.
I need to find my mother. My flesh and blood, yours came to you. Finally. I'm going to mine.
A fascinating tangle of identities among three brothers. William Shatner, Colleen Dewhurst, Monique Mercure in The Third Walker.
A one-time director, she had made a very interesting documentary. It was a bit of a disaster, really, but we learned a lot about. I mean, it was a big film. It was on location in Cape Breton, and we learned a lot. We learned a lot, and it paid its dividends in when it came to filming on a big film. James Bond film is extraordinary mechanism. You know, it's like an army. You got the actors are the foot soldiers, and then the cameramen are the artillery, and spotlighting with the lighting cameramen, and then the makeup is the kind of first aid. And, you get massaged, and you get all the gossip and so on. And of course, the general is, it's extraordinary. That's why there are many great films made about filmmaking, because such an extraordinary experience. You know, Wim Wenders and Truffaut, of course. La Nuit Américaine was totally well. I actually relate to that because we were watching movies in the 50s, one little television at our prep school, and then there would be a night scene, but it would be strangely kind of bright, and there would be clouds. You could see the clouds in the night sky, and I was thinking, oh, that's what nights look like in America. But of course, it was just day for night, you know. But anyway, it's extraordinary that that we were given that. But yeah, where did you see The Third Walker?
I've not seen it. That was the problem. I was trying to find a copy of it, and I wanted to find out more about the film through you guys. Really.
Well, it was written and made by Terry McLuhan, who was a twin. And so I've forgotten now. Oh yeah, yes. And wanted to make a film about twins. I think she may have got hold of a story and then made and she was, what can I say? She was the daughter of Marshall McLuhan. Now, you might not know who Marshall McLuhan is. He was a Canadian who, in the late 60s, wrote a book called The Medium is the Message. And people thought he was crazy because, you'll never believe this, he had the idea that we were all going to be part of some global village, that we were all going to be connected by computers or something like that. And he was madman. He died early 80s before all those ideas were completely vindicated. He got it completely right. He was predicting the internet like no one else. But
he was the most famous thinker for 15 minutes. Certainly, he was the most famous, kind of the most famous media man in the world. And people thought, some people, he appears in Woody Allen's movie. I think it's
in the queue. Yes, in the cinema queue.
Is it
Dan Keaton?
Is it Manhattan or the other one?
It's not Annie Hall.
Annie Hall. And someone is talking about Marshall McLuhan in the queue in front of him. That's how famous he was. And Woody Allen says, "You are talking nonsense. That is not true. It's not true. I will get Marshall McLuhan." And Marshall McLuhan is brought on to the scene. Can you tell this person that he says, "Yeah, you've got my ideas all wrong. You are talking complete nonsense." There you are. You see, that's Marshall McLuhan, and so that's. Right. He was that famous. Could be presented in a film. Everyone would know who he was talking to. I don't know who would be. It will be Jordan Peterson now, possibly.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. yeah, interesting, yeah.
But I think did I meet him? Yes, because I went to do some dubbing later over, and we stayed. I went over to her and met Marshall McLuhan. But it was, it was don't think it really worked out. We must have seen a showing of it probably in Canada House, because I think it got shown in a festival but interesting in Berlin. But it's interesting that you didn't find a copy.
No, not if anyone could. Anyone?
I mean,
we'd love to
you won't hear my voice, because it all had to be redubbed afterwards, and some Canadian actor dubbed my entire part, I think.
Oh, no.
Maybe because I was completely unconvincing. We all had to put on, you had to have a
French-Canadian accent.
And it was
about as bad as Olivier's French-Canadian accent in the 49th parallel. But without apparently his charm, which gets away with it. But,
watching that, you'd swear that Olivier was the worst actor in the world. But it was in the Cape Breton Island, so we were on location there, and we all had various. And I had to have half Irish American accent, because that's a lot of Irish immigrants, and it was it was interesting.
We had what's his name? William Shatner.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's his name? Disrespect. Who was having a sort of, it was after, there weren't many early episodes of Star Wars. It was only for quite a limited number.
Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, Star Trek.
That's typical. I mean, I kind of get them all muddled, I'm afraid. As they say in Friends, who is it that says, they're no different? That's whatever. But and he was sort of out of work, he was, because it was over, but before the great kind of Renaissance and, when it all came back. But he was terrific. He knew that I didn't know what I was doing, and he was working hard. He was supposed to be, he was the long lost father who suddenly appeared. And, Terry McLuhan said, I said, I can't get Tony to do whatever. He said, don't worry, I'll get it to do it. And so my experience was very generous.
Good. No, that's nice.
Colin Dewhurst, of course, extraordinary character, wonderful woman, married to George C. Scott twice. They were married and then got divorced and then got married again. But she had this wonderful phrase, no antennae. She was the people who had no antennae, people who had no sense of third or fourth sense, let alone of sixth sense.
Yeah.
But as you said, it was an adventure, and it was still in good stead.
Wow.
You've done loads of other stuff. I mean, one of them is Ben's, the film with Clive Owen, who was once touted as Bond. And I just wondered, David, whether you could tell us a bit about your time on that film.
Yes, again, Martin Sherman was a friend of mine, in fact. I did audition for the part of Rudy for the original production, because actually I'd done a lot of what looked like dancing with Lindsay Kemp. But the acting wasn't good enough. And so it didn't get the part, but I was there when I could see the show going on and followed its success. And then there were various people who wanted to they were trying to make movies of it. And eventually Sean Mathias got the script together. And so, there was a little part I could do. Well, that would be nice. And I do just have one. I will have one. It's typical because we've had a terrific career. There have been empty years in between, but every so often I would find myself doing something that people will be given their eyes teeth to do. It's just because that's the way it's happened. And I've been just very lucky in that. And I had one scene, and that was with Mick Jagger. I mean, that was difficult. It was great, wonderful to work with. Actually, I was walking back with him. I said, we have almost met before because you came to see a show that I did with Lindsay Kemp called Flowers. And we knew you were in the audience, and because, oh, Lindsay, yes, I remember him, he said, yeah. That was a nice career, but it was and Jude Law had only just started coming up, and actually I'd auditioned him possibly to do a puck in a production of the Benjamin Britten's opera that I was doing, because he'd just come from the National Youth Theatre, and I saw him in the same Sadler's Wells Theatre. So I'd sort of come across him before. I remember my fond memory of sharing a chocolate with Jude Law at 2:30 in the morning during a night shoot, watching this crazy cafe scene going on a thing with and I just had to come in with as a sinister Gestapo agent glaring at people through. It was a nice little cameo to do. Yeah. And Clive Owen was just wonderful to talk with, so relaxed and open, and you were greeted as a colleague. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And I don't know how great he'd be as James Bond. Who knows what the next James Bond is going to be? I mean, Daniel Craig's done a terrific work, but he kind of killed him too, of course.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you seen? You've obviously seen.
I mean,
No
is he going to be reborn like Doctor Who?
Well, it has to be.
Totally different sex or color. Who knows what's going to happen? I think
so
that's why.
Are you still up to date with the franchise? Do you still follow it quite closely? Do you try and watch them when they come out?
Not religiously, of course. I thought Casino Royale was terrific. I love that moment because the film is about how he became James Bond and how it became the slightly distant, manipulative person that he is with females, and how he was going to, and then something cold inside him. And doesn't want to get involved because he gets involved with his girl who betrays him, and so he knows that he mustn't ever make himself vulnerable on that side. And then he lays it to that person in the last scene. And he says, the name is Bond, James Bond. Bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, bum. It's a movement, fabulous moment, and James Bond is created at that moment.
Good Bond, that was a good audition, that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we have to keep up, really. I mean, we've just become part of this incredible franchise, an incredible story. So I mean, it would be churlish not to see. We had in Paris, we met the mother and the daughter in the beginning of No Time to Die.
Right, okay, yeah.
It was charming. I've got their autographs actually, and it's a really spooky first scene. I must admit, and it's what I remember almost most about the film. Truffaut said the most terrible thing in film is to see a child in peril. You know, walking along a windowsill in a high-rise building or something like that, you know. And it's a bit like that, you know. It's like that, you know. And the girl in it was rather almost like a relief to meet her and for in real life to sort of know that she was okay. And this I must get the pronunciation. Le Acedo too was good to see her again. I think they were terrific in the one before together, her and Daniel. When they met, and then the sort of spending a night together and her in the bed, and I remember that scene very well. There was a sort of rapport between the actor and the actress, which was went in a sense beyond Bond. They weren't just doing Bond things, you know. A bit like Timothy Dalton and Mariam Dabo in Living Daylights. I think they work really well together. I can see it's a tradition of English actor and actress working, you know, who'd done their rep, who'd done their this, and they were just, you know, doing a great job. And it's one of my favorite Bonds, definitely, actually. The really interesting cast: Caroline Bliss and Julie Wallace.
We've spoken to her.
Malik, you know, a friend. Nick Daubeny was on location, and there are some shots in the deserts which are cinematic. I mean, actually, you know,
very.
The way that Bond films sometimes, you know, they don't look, they haven't got that artistic. Look, they do a great job, as it were, but there's something very beautiful about the shots there. And Mariam Dabo playing a cello, riding a horse, and driving an aeroplane. I think it's probably one of my favorite Bond girls. Definitely, very intelligent. Makes films herself, I believe.
We have spoken to her as well.
That's what I remember from the recent Bonds, I must admit. But Craig has done a wonderful job and been very clever in kind of owning it in the end, you know, by sort of making sure that it has his whole appearance and disappearance has this kind of to it, you know.
One of my greatest Bond fan moment was actually meeting the parkour French guy who does all free running
yeah.
at the beginning of Casino Royale.
Yeah.
And I went along. He had a desk at the other end of the room, and I went along with a picture of me on the moving train. And I said, "This is what we used to do in the old days." And he got a moving train, and he was so sweet. He said, "Oh, I have always wanted to do that on a moving train, perhaps," because he'd always done it in the buildings. And we, in a wonderful, lovely way, we swapped photographs and signed to each other, to my dear friend. So I felt like a real fan, because I was in awe of what he did. I said, "You actually rebooted the entire James Bond series by that opening sequence," I think, which is kind of true.
Real stunts, aren't they? That's what we want from a Bond film, you know.
But the fact that he was gracious enough to say, "Oh, no, that was really good," I only went along as a joke. He said that.
Do you ever have any moments in those moments like that? Do you ever have any? Does it ever have a revelation where you two came before him, as in you are some really iconic villains that came long before that, and dare I probably say you two, as great as that parkour scene is, you two live longer in the history and in the memory of Bond fans than that. You two are genuinely way up there.
I don't know why that it is. John Glenn kindly said we'd sort of stood the test of time or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think we've dated, strangely enough, even despite the hairdressing or whatever.
I didn't know.
I don't know. It's just sort of worked out that way. I mean, it was an extraordinary film, as I say, because there is one moment in Octopussy when a stuffed tiger's head is pushed out of the jungle. And John in the DVD says, "I think we got away with that." And no, John, I mean, you would never dream of seeing that in a film now. I mean, let alone $1 million movie,
We love it.
But on the whole, it's rather, having done a bit of Brecht, it's rather sort of wonderful, it's rather sort of hands-on kind of deconstructing cinema,
But to give Roger credit as an actor, the scene with you, David, that really hits home. I think the cold killer. That's for 009. I do think he is underrated as an actor, Roger.
And I must admit, sure. VJ is very good in it too.
Yeah.
With that. Why isn't he using? You aren't using, an equity actor, as it were, and with very good argument, in fact. But he's terrific in it, and brings a kind of energy and life. And why not use other people in films like that?
Yeah.
And he, and Camille Betty is wonderful in it. There used to be quite a question about black actors in Bond films, although there's one in Dr. No, of course.
Yeah.
Although classically he gets killed first.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
But actually, the first shot in Dr. No is the 3 West Indian guys, isn't it? And there's a couple of lines which borderline, which you think are not nice to hear, really. But it has this sort of infectious energy about it, and as I said, with stuffed tigers' heads, it's pretend, Interestingly enough, people say yes, but then the contrast also is extraordinary with scenes that apparently work, like ours, or and that's good to hear.
I did have this little scene with Ben Whishaw in London Spy.
Yes.
It's typical of my career. I don't think I'd done anything else in the rest of the year, and I get cast as Ben Wishaw's father. Like every act. Oh no, what? Because everyone loves Ben Whishaw, and of course he's a very wonderful and lovely, great person to be. But I did say jokingly to him, I said, "I think your cue is terrific. It's wonderful stuff." I said, "But you can tell Sam Mendes you're working with a person who did the first fight on top of a train, which references in Skyfall.
Yes.
It does, doesn't it? Because he did say he was trying to reference early movies.
Okay,
and in that sequence, I thought, where have I seen that before?
Yeah.
And dare I say, the Octopussy train scene is far better than the Skyfall.
Well, it's so good.
Oh, you're too kind. A lot more happens in the Skyfall one. There's a lot more stuff going on, isn't there? I mean,
but that's the point.
The carriages.
There's a scene. There's a shot of an Octopussy of Kabir Bedi and kind of when they go into the tunnel and the smoke or whatever. Actually, that's a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
On the DVD, he says, "Oh, it was quite tricky. You know, we had a difficult time doing that." Of course, it wasn't really moving, and it wasn't, it wasn't outside. But so bless him, David didn't get a mention.
One of your questions. Those bits are done on the studio, aren't they? I think
there's something. Yes. There's a lovely studio, but it looks great. I thought, that if we could have done with more of that, but then of course there's wonderful girls to look at, and then great landscape, and there's circus scenes, as I say. Barbara Broccoli did a fantastic job, if I'm right in saying that. Was that a sort of baby? You could just get that together, and it works beautifully.
Well, guys, one last question: when you do these 40th anniversary Octopussy celebration weekends or whatever, are you going to don the outfits again?
The purple shirts.
No. I don't know where they are, and nobody suggested it, and I don't think we have to. We could maybe have a purple T-shirt that should give us slightly, but no, we haven't been for that. We haven't.
We've been wearing the wigs, of course, but
taking a few kitchen knives as well.
Oh, thank you very much, guys, for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful journey through.
It's been amazing.
Cinema and James Bond and
an actor's life. I have to say,
it's so good.
We had the pandemic to look back on it all. You thought, it's not bad on the whole.
Who saw the Tolstoy that I did, Death of Ivan Ilyin?
Yeah, I've not seen it, but there's loads of things you've done that I'm desperate to sort of track down now. Like,
well, there's a tape of it still. And I was fascinated to learn that Werner Dobchev was in it, who of course, and Vladimir Shabel was in a Hamlet we did, and both of them have been in villains. I didn't know, but Werner Dobchev, there's great stories about him, turning up in. He worked for Ken Russell in the early days, he's been around for a long time, and bless him, done fantastic work. But no, we were very impressed that you knew of these places. Anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
I mean, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor to speak to both of you, and you are like, we don't just say this, you're big, massive parts of one of our favorite Bond films, and it's to us, this is massive that we're speaking to Mischka Grischka. And
such an honor.
It is. It's a real
alive. Yes.
With still a full head of hair. And it's just it's amazing, and it's so great to hear about your careers, which are obviously incredibly acclaimed and established.
Yeah. All right.
And this is for my brother. It just makes no sense. But I was thinking of something else, as Jim Broadbent, who I went to drama school with, was introducing us. He said, "Now you've met the set."
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It's been wonderful.
Take care. Nice to meet you.
You too as well. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
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 You can hear loads of our other episodes on iTunes, Spotify, and our YouTube channel, where we have interviews, special episodes, and reviews of all the Bond films. Simply search Really 007 Pod, and you should find loads of weird and wonderful content.
Remember, you're only president for life.